is this GT, like, and afterwards I'm like, well, he started ghosting me, whatever, and it's like, you're not like human, it's just like, you make one little mistake, like, people will take it so offense, so much offense, like, I remember, I had we had a department meeting, we were with the department manager, because like my boss is close. Okay. I remember, I was on.
Okay, should we get started? Bismillah. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we're just going to jump right back into some of the stuff we were talking about. For those who weren't here last time we met, which was not last Wednesday, right? It was 2 Wednesdays ago. We've been looking at, for a good chunk of time, this text that collates all of the narrations that are relevant to Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. So within the prophetic biography, we're at the latter part of the Meccan period of the prophetic biography. The Prophet ﷺ has been taken from his home in Mecca to the city of Jerusalem and then taken into the heavens. And we were looking at this in a few different frames. There's a verse of the Quran that says, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Indeed, with hardship there is ease. With hardship there is ease. And the Prophet, immediately prior to this, has been subjugated to abuse and persecution at the city of Taif after he severed all ties with people in Mecca, hoping that people in Taif would welcome him in. They pelted him with stones. He's like left bloodied and in all kinds of difficult experiences. Before that, his wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha passes away. His uncle Abu Talib passes away. Before that, they sustain like multiple years of boycott, persecution, tribulation. They're eating like leaves and boiled leather and all kinds of hardship that they're going through as they're boycotting in self-exile in this valley near Mecca because they're trying to kill the Prophet of God. And before that, he's got a lot of hardship and persecution and tribulation. He's seeing people getting abused, beaten, even killed for embracing Islam. After all of this, like, he's taken on this journey as a mode of healing. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Indeed, with hardship, there comes ease. Throughout it, he's now like 52 years of age. He's an older man. He's not like 40 when he gets prophethood. He's also not 18. So he's learning throughout the process. He's being asked by the angel Jibrail, who's guiding him, do you know who this person was? Do you know what this place was? He would ask the angel himself, like, what is this? Who are these people? His knowledge acquisition doesn't stop, but also there's an intrinsic link between knowing and contentment. Like, healing comes also through knowing. Do you see? We're wired to want to know, and where you can have empirical understandings of things that'll answer questions of how and what, questions of why are things that the heart finds contentment through just having an understanding of. Islam is a knowledge-based civilization. You don't need a high level of literacy to be Muslim. The bar of entry is not here. It's purposely down here because anybody can be Muslim if they want to. But we're wired to be people who we increase through like knowing. Does that make sense? And the Prophet is finding contentment through like knowing as well. He is meeting different prophets of God, finding like different affirmation and validation. The last time we spoke, he had now gotten to a place that we discussed. One is called Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur, right? And this was like an area designated in the heavens that is above like where the Kaaba is. 70,000 angels will come at any given time, to perform worship and then leave. And we talked about this in the frame of like, why is this something we need to know? Well, like 70,000 angels at any given moment coming and then leaving, and then another group coming and leaving. Like, God doesn't need our worship. Our worship isn't done by us for him. Our worship is done by us for us. Do you know? And then we talked about this place that's called As-Sidrat al-Muntaha, like the farthest limit, the Lot tree. This is like a place now as a boundary that nobody is like moving beyond. The Prophet ﷺ himself is going to move past this now, and he's going to engage in direct interaction with Allah Azza wa Jal. And we're going to get into this part of this discussion and hopefully wrap up with Al-Isra wal-Miraj here today. There's a little bit left that goes into the Meccan period of the Seerah. We'll pick up with like the Seerah programs then after Ramadan is done, right? Ramadan starts in a few days. May Allah bless us to reach it and take benefit from it. So we won't meet on Wednesdays in Ramadan because of iftar and the timings of everything. And Dr. Marwa will likely be doing most of the Wednesday pre-iftar halakas. I'm going to do Fridays and most of the weekends. But we'll pick up after like Ramadan is done again on Wednesdays at this time. And then after Memorial Day, we'll shift it to be a little bit earlier in the day. But we'll end with like the Meccan period, probably at some point before April ends, and then get into the Medinese period, right? When they go to Medina, you know? Great. So I'm just going to pick up from where we left off last time. The Prophet then saw the Kawthar, right? This was the river fount that he's given, Inna Atayna Kal Kawthar. And on its banks were domes of hollowed pearl. The soil of its banks was over fragrant musk. Then the fire was shown to him. In it he saw Allah's wrath and his punishment and sanction. Were rocks and iron to be thrown into it, the fire would consume them completely. In it were a people who were eating carrion. The Prophet said, "Who are these, O Jibra'il?" He replied, "Those who ate the flesh of people." And the Prophet saw Malik, the custodian of the fire. He was a grim figure whose face expressed anger. The Prophet greeted him first. Then the gates of the fire were closed as he stood outside, and he was raised up beyond the low tree, beyond Sidratul Muntaha, and a cloud concealed him from everything else, and Jibra'il stayed back, right? A couple of quick things here, juxtaposing the idea that if rocks and iron were thrown into the fire, that the fire would consume it, right? But he sees people in it, and that means he sees them there. Do you know? And as he's seeing them and they're being identified, they're eating the flesh of people, right? And we've talked about this a lot, like backbiting, gossiping, crazy haram. Like don't do these things. Do you know? And that's not the point I want to get into today. If the fire would consume the rock that's thrown into it completely, how come these people are not then like obliterated when they're placed in it? Do you understand what the question is? Right? Because he's prefacing it, were rocks and iron to be thrown into the fire, it would consume them completely. And in it were a people who were eating carrion, right? So something is different there, that these two things exist in different ways in this same like place. Do you know? Jahannam in and of itself is not just like a place of chastisement and punishment, but it's a place of purification also. Like people who are being judged on the day of judgment, may Allah make it easy for us. Paradise is a place that only accepts the epitome of purity. And some people will be entered in with no judgment. Some people will have like all kinds of like movements, fast, slow, going across a bridge that's called the Sirat. And then there's some people who spend some time in Jahannam as a mechanism of expiation for wrong that they did before they're put into Jannah. Do you get what I mean? The rock and the iron doesn't have any other need after like the world's existence. It plays its purpose. You as a person don't respond to fire in the same way, but it's giving like a sense that like this is an intense thing, and part of its intensity is also a mechanism of purification. And that's why like you want to do that stuff here so you don't have to do that stuff and experience it later on. May Allah make it easy for us. right? It's not a religion that understands these things to be metaphorical or just like illustrative or allegorical. They're like real things. There's a hell and there's a heaven. May Allah make us people of heaven. Do you know? And understanding like what is some of the purposes of it. And at the latter part now, like when he gets to Asidatul Muntaha, nobody goes with him. Do you see? And you want to think about this not in like an isolated state, but think about it relevant to everything that's happened up until this point. When we talked about in the first experiences of revelation, the second experiences of revelation, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he is in a place where like he has doubt, he has immense doubt, and that's just from seeing the angel Jibrail, who's not even allowed to go past this point anymore. And I just said this over there in the healthy relationships thing we were doing for converts and our Latino Muslim group. But we were talking about Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and I said, like, one of the things like that is said of Khadija, of her merits, is that, you know, the Prophet believed in Allah, but he doubted himself when he got revelation. She was the first person to not just believe La ilaha illallah, he believed that, but she was the first one to believe Muhammad Rasulullah. Do you know? He had doubt and she had to affirm that for him. Do you see? Does that make sense? She's not there with him now also. He's met like prophet after prophet, the angels with him. He's like giving him insight on stuff, but now he's going to go into this part of the journey alone. Right? In doing that and experiencing it, he's not carrying physically like people with him, but all of these people that he meets, all of these people he has a care for, all of them that have affirmed a care for him, he's still carrying them within. Do you understand? You're going to go into some places where you're the only Muslim. You're going to go into some places where like the person that you're talking to is intimidating. You're going to be in a place sometimes where like nobody's around you and it's just you and Allah and you're praying to Allah. And what gives courage and what gives strength is a willingness to embrace like being loved and a willingness to also then in turn be loving. It's going to give you a strength and energy when you're willing to actually love fully, and is going to endow you with the courage when you can acknowledge that you are loved to take on intimidating things. Because imagine someone is telling you nobody's ever gone past this point before, and even Jibrail, who filled the entire horizons when he came with the first revelation and is the teacher of the prophet, is telling the prophet, I got to stay here now, right? And that can be all kinds of anxiety inducing. What's giving him the strength to move past that point? How does he keep like going and keep going and keep going? Taif, they push him down, he doesn't stop, right? Mecca, he's got to send people to Abyssinia. He doesn't stop. He's in a place where his wife dies, his uncle dies. He still doesn't stop. He's going through all of this stuff, seeing like punishment, seeing like benefits. I mean, think about it, right? If you put in this much effort and you're dealing with death and tribulation and people are throwing rocks at you, and then somebody's showing you people and they're like, well, what are these people doing? And they were gossiping, so that's why they're in Jahannam. You're like, well, what's the point of me doing what I'm doing? These guys are going to still be backbiting anyway. But he doesn't think that way. He doesn't see that way. Do you understand? And even now, where there's unfamiliarity, there's uncharted territories, he's still getting done what needs to happen, right? What are the other things that contribute to this? Do you get what I mean? Because a lot of us walk around on eggshells. Something pushes us down and we get knocked down hard. Do you know? We're in a place where like courage is understood to be the middle way, because the prophet's example is the middle way. So recklessness and cowardliness, these are extremes, and courage is like the middle balanced way, right? What is happening that enables him to kind of move forward in these ways. Because he doesn't have Medina yet. He doesn't even know like what's going to be happening fully. Do you see what I mean? And we've gone through over a decade plus of prophethood, as well as 40 years prior of socialization, that those moments inform like moments like this. When I got to step up, what's going to give me the energy and fuel to keep going? Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? So I like for you to do, just so we kind of get talking to each other, turn to the person next to you. If you don't know names, exchange names. What do you think is equipping him to go into this uncharted place? How does he keep finding like the resolve to keep moving forward? Let's talk about that a bit, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead.
So he asked like how one of the girls. He does. I have more of it's crazy. Like it looks so easy. Like it's ridiculous. Like why not? Like I can go and I can try to like not give up. I can't even do that. I can't even do it on the ground. Say I don't know what's happening. That's the only thing I can that sounds like a. I tried out. So one of the I think like good. Sorry? Oh, a whole sleep. It's just yeah, determination to a goal. Those who this. I want to know how to talk to yeah, but also, one of the girls, she had it, and she had it. She was like, "It's good." It's just a little like, this is gluten free. Yeah, this is good. I'll try this more. I feel like why? It should be so weird. Probably you know what the optimal and it's like really like I mean, if you get the chance to inshallah one day you can go to like northern Albania. The terrain itself is one of the most difficult terrain out there because it's mountains and it's like ginormous mountains, right? Imagine this: someone hates something so bad. And this is back in the day when there's no hills or whatever. They will go hike through all that mountain just to see something. And the amount of resolve that they have to go through that is ludicrous.
Okay. What are some of the things that we're discussing? What's coming up for people? Like how does he keep doing this? Do you know? Do you not know? Yeah. So I'm a little tired. Yeah.
Iman and I talked about just his unwavering tawakkul, just like that's just like the most important thing, just like knowing God got you, like, and then not leaving until like.
Yeah, but how does he have that? Like we know he. So how? Like how does that happen? Do you know? Like I want that. Tell me how I can get it. Yeah.
I'm just
You can tell me. Yeah.
I'm speculating. I was thinking about the hadiths that you like to bring up so often, where you should greet the people that you know and the people that you don't know, and then you remind us that on the day of judgment you will only be greeting people that you know, and then like everyone's going to be running around sort of like looking out for themselves, perhaps throwing other people under the bus. And like the only person who will not be doing that, right, is the Prophet of Islam. He will be saying like ummati, ummati, like my ummah, like thinking always about us rather than himself and putting us first. And I was thinking maybe that's like a bit of a source of strength in the sense that when you're afraid for yourself, for him to remind himself like I'm not only doing this for myself, like I'm doing this for my people, and that's a source of like sort of growth, strength, and momentum.
Yeah, amazing, right? Like, how can you guide a people you don't love? Do you know? How? You can't be a prophet of a people if you don't love them. You think the prophet hates anybody in Mecca? Do you know? Like you can't guide a people you don't love, right? What else? Like what else contributes to this? You know? Yeah.
Trust in Allah.
Yeah, but that's what she just said.
Oh, no,
But
no.
how where does it come from? Right? Why he wasn't listening to you. Does it make you feel sad? It's okay. Yeah. Don't worry. You guys went on Umrah together. You have a bond forever. Yeah. What is creating that tawakkul? Do you know? Like there's an outcome of like actions. Do you see? Right? Kutiba alaykum as-siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. Fasting was written for you as it was written for those who came before you, so perhaps you might attain taqwa, right? You got to do the act that then yields the consequence of the act, right? So how do I get more in me that gets me to go into places that I need like a courage to go in? I need like a sense of like trust. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
I think it's primarily through making a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the best way to do that would be through salah.
Okay. Yeah. Salah. What else? Yeah.
Maybe there's also like he be reflecting on when he has been pulled through before, like in the Doha when he talked about like he's at a really low point and he's wondering if he's been abandoned. And it's like a reminder of all the times that you were an orphan and like all the times that he was in struggle before, but he's been pulled through, and maybe I don't know, maybe reminding like to increase that's why or to increase that connection, you like look back to when you've been helped before.
Yeah. And in order to look back, you got to have a moment where you're actually breathing and able to have retrospect, right? If you're constantly just running and it's chaotic, you can't have salah that has presence to it if like you're just moving in the motions as fast as possible. This is why the hadith says, don't pray like a rooster pecking on the earth. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just pecking at the ground because it's the physical parts to it, right? But you like bring ease into every motion as you're moving from one position to the next. Do you know? A combination of variables like yields outcomes that are like this. But you got to be able to think as you're recognizing who our prophet is, alayhi salam, he doesn't lack courage. He's not a cowardly human being. and he's putting himself in all kinds of positions that has a reciprocal relationship to it. The love that he has that creates a selflessness that has to exist if you don't have an egocentric worldview. Because if you're not egocentric, right, then I'm not the center of everything. Do you know? Something else is at the center. It's not me. But the adoption of a worldview that's God-centric enables him to be one who also gains the most from his selflessness. You understand? Al-jazaa al-ihsani ila al-ihsan. Is there like any like reward for ihsan, like spiritual excellence and beauty, other than like more of it? Like it just perpetuates itself. The way that you increase in patience is by being patient. The way that you increase in like courage is by being courageous. Say you get up after every prayer automatically. You don't make dua, you don't make dhikr. And you're like, I got to sit down and make dua. If you do it for 5 seconds the first time, after you do it for like 3 months that way, you'll probably be able to sit down for a few minutes. But you're building a muscle in that way, right? And what's a muscle that he has built in so many different ways? It's like care, compassion, kindness, integrity, honesty, selflessness. All of these things as virtues and values are impacting now his inner self that brings him to a moment that's like, nobody is able to get past this point other than me. And when you have now like an understanding, the vessels come like milk and wine. He chooses the milk and not the wine. He takes the like unadulterated, like the pure substance, not the one that is adulterated. Do you know? But choices and decisions that we make prior to will bear their presence in the moment. And he's choosing perspective here because there's not anything that he walks out of and he's going to tell people after the fact that, like, you know how much better I am than the rest of you? Guess where I got to go and nobody else got to go? Do you know? But there's no like ego involved. Do you see? You're going to see it. Like they come back into Mecca and all these people who mistreated him and companions who remember like Uhud that we'll talk about in some months, and like people dying and being killed, and they hold vengeance and retribution and anger and grudges in their heart, right? La Quraysh ba'd al-yawm. There's going to be no Quraysh after today when they go for the conquest of Mecca, coming back from Medina. And our prophet, he is like literally with his head covered at the back of a pack, walking through it with no sense of arrogance and just saying, this house is forgiven and that house is forgiven. It's just humility. And it's so beautiful. I don't know if you've ever sat down with people who are like influential, like people. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like, and people go nuts with all kinds of things. I was in Toronto this morning and I was giving a keynote at a conference, and a woman came and sat next to me. She introduced herself to me and she was like, there's something I've been wanting to ask you for so long. And I was like, oh, please ask me, right? I'm Khalid Latif. She was like, what was it like meeting Shawn Mendes at your gym? Like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? You know, right? And
the prophet was taken up to a point where he heard the screeching of the pens, writing the divine decree. He saw a man who disappeared into the light of the throne. He said, who is this? Is this an angel? It was said to him, no. He said, is it a prophet? Again, the answer is no. He said, who is it then? The answer was, this is a man whose tongue was moist with Allah's remembrance in the world, and his heart was attached to the mosques, and never incurred the curse of his father and mother. Then the prophet saw his Lord, the glorious, the exalted, and he fell prostrate. And at that time his Lord spoke to him and said, O Muhammad. He replied, at your service, O Lord. Allah said, ask. And then the prophet said what he's about to say. There's different opinions theologically, right? About what does it mean that the prophet saw Allah. There's companions who are recorded as saying the Prophet did not see Allah, like in that sense, because how could you see Allah? There's other hadith that say like Allah is like veiled by his light, right? There's some who have the opinions that he experienced this like from a vision of the heart, not a vision of the eyes, right? Allah knows best, you know? But what we know and understand is that there is this interaction between the Prophet and God. And when you get to nuances in theology, right, what you really want to trickle it down to is that we have one God, and that's it, you know? And theological debates have taken place for a long time. If it's interesting to you, like get into it. Do you know what I mean? But sometimes you have to have mental prostrations in order to move forward within the prism of theological discussions. Do you see? So the Prophet says, when Allah says, ask, the Prophet said, you have taken to yourself Ibrahim as a friend, and you have given him an immense kingdom. You have spoken to Musa directly, and have given Dawood an immense kingdom, and softened iron and subjected the mountains to him. You have given Suleiman an immense kingdom, and subjected the jinn and men and devils to him, as well as the winds, and you have given him a kingdom the like no one may have after him. You have taught Isa the Torah and the Evangel, and made him heal those born blind and the lepers, and raise up the dead with your permission. And you have protected him and his mother from the cursed devil, so that the devil had no path by which to harm them. And Allah said, and I have taken you to myself as my beloved. The narrator says, it is written in the Torah, Habibullah, Allah's beloved. Allah continued, and I have sent you for all people without exception, a bearer of glad tidings and a warner, and I have expanded your chest for you and relieved you of your burden and exalted your name, and I have not mentioned except that you are mentioned with me, and I have made your community the best community ever brought out for the benefit of mankind, and I have made your community a mean and a middle, and I have made your community in truth the first and the last of all communities, and I have made public address impermissible for your community unless they first witness that you are my servant and messenger. And I have placed certain people in your community with evangels for hearts, i.e., repositories of Allah's book. And I have made you the first prophet created, and the last one sent, and the first one heard in my court. And I have given you 7 of the oft repeated, which I gave to no other prophet before you, meaning Surah Al-Fatiha. And I've given you the last verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, which constitute a treasure from under my throne, which I gave to no other prophet before you. And I've given you the Kawthar, and I've given you 8 arrows, i.e. shares of good fortune. Islam, immigration, meaning hijrah, jihad, charity, sadaqah, fasting Ramadan, ordering good and forbidding evil. And the day I created the heavens and the earth, I made obligatory upon you and upon your community 50 prayers. Therefore, establish them, you and your community. The Shami adds that Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh says that Allah's messenger said, my Lord has preferred me over everyone else. He has sent me as a mercy to the worlds and to all people without exception, a bearer of glad tidings and a warner. He has thrown terror into the hearts of my enemies at a distance of a month's travel. He has made spoils of war lawful for me while they were not lawful for anyone before me. The entire earth has been made a ritually pure place of prostration for me. I was given the words that open, those that close, and those that are comprehensive in meaning. My community was shown to me, and there is none of the followers and the followed, but he is known to me. I saw that they would come to a people that wear hair-covered sandals. I saw that they would come to a people of large faces and small eyes, as if they had been pierced with a needle. Nothing of what they would face in the future has been kept hidden from me, and I have been ordered to perform 50 prayers daily. And he has been given 3 particular merits. He is the master of messengers, Sayyid al-Mursaleen, the leader of the God-wary, Imam al-Muttaqeen, and the chief of those with signs of light on their faces and limbs, Qa'id al-Ghur al-Muhajjalin. This is the end of Shami's edition. Another narration says, the Prophet was given the 5 daily prayers and the last verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, and for his sake, whoever of his community does not associate anything with Allah is forgiven, even the sins that destroy. When the cloud that cloaked him was dispelled, and Jibreel took him by the hand and hurried him away until he reached Ibrahim, who did not say anything. Then the Prophet reached Musa, who asked, what did you do, O Muhammad? What obligations did your Lord impose on you and your community? He replied, he imposed 50 prayers every day and night on me and my community. Musa said, return to your Lord and ask him to lighten your burden and that of your community, for in truth, your community will not be able to carry it. Indeed, I myself have experienced people's natures before you. I tested the children of Israel and took the greatest pains to hold them to something easier than this, but they were too weak to carry it and they abandoned it. Your community are even weaker in their bodies and constitutions, in their hearts, in their sight, and in their hearing. The Prophet turned to Jibreel to consult. The latter indicated to him, yes, that if you wish, then return. The Prophet hurried back until he reached the tree and the cloud cloaked him.